Garrett Blevins here with an overview, kind of real quick and short, really, just some of the heavier lifts of days 1 and 2 of really what is, I don't know, a different cycle than what a lot of people are on right now. I'm testing something out on myself, and this particular variation of the program has a conservative max on the first week that allows you to pick some numbers and have a separate progression based off of RPE and percentages, based off of those conservative max calculations. So one thing I'll say so far is it's been beating the heck out of me. These first couple days, especially after going heavy on the deload, really beat me up. 580 was supposed to be for a set of 3 at 8. But when I got to my third rep on the set, it was so easy. I knew that I needed to go a little higher. I thought it'd maybe be 1 or 2 extra reps. And when I got to rep 6 on this set, it was still probably at an 8, maybe not even that. And so this kind of messed up my whole day and really the next 2 days because of how much extra work I had to do after this. But that rep there still felt pretty easy. I'm really happy with that set. But it did mess up my calculations a little bit. So this is where someone stood in front of my camera. So I tried to cut the image as best I could. 635 by 3 is my PR triple on squats. And the last time I did it, it was an epic grind, for me at least, on the last rep. This last rep moved up really smooth, really easy. That was a great set, and that makes me very excited for when I finally start doing some singles on squats and looking at this competition maybe in February. I'm looking at, so we'll see how that goes. Anyways, bench 425 after all that squatting was kind of rough. This shirt that I'm wearing I had not worn before, and it's a little slippery on the bench presses, and so that's something that I'll know it's just not a great shirt to bench in, as it's pretty tough for me to get a good arch with this particular shirt. That's something to take stock of too when you are having an off day, especially with bench press, is what are you wearing? Sometimes that makes a difference. If your shirt is slick and it slides around on the bench, that can make a big difference in how your reps feel and how comfortable they are. But anyways, did some back off work there. This is from the next day. I was actually supposed to do this triple on the day I was doing those squats, but I was so beat from having 2 heavy sets of squats that it was not going to happen. This is without straps. By the way, this is just my grip, which is not my issue. A little bit of backgrounding on the third rep that I did not like so much. Need to work on that, but still really good for conventional deadlift, at least for me. All right, so continuing on with our Christian ethics series here, I want to read you a little more from Philippians 2 here to really get at some very practical implications for what Christian ethics looks like as we as humanity image God. And the way we understand what imaging God looks like is through the behavior of Jesus, who Christians believe to be the second person of the Trinity embodied as a human being. So Jesus, who being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped. He made himself of no reputation and took upon himself the form of a servant, and was made in the likeness of humanity. And being found in the likeness of humanity, he humbled himself and became obedient unto death, even the death of the cross. Therefore God has highly exalted him, and has given him a name which is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, the things in heaven, the things in earth, and the things under the earth, and that every tongue should confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of the Father. Now, this is such an important point being made about Jesus and about the very nature of God that I'm probably going to spend a little bit of time here because it is so important for Christian ethics. So it's not that this point is not made other places, but rather that I think this point is made so clearly in this passage, that Jesus, the Son, who is equal to the Father, does not consider equality with God a thing to be grasped. The Greek word for grasped is the word for like harpooned. It's sometimes translated as robbery, but it's when you seize something and take it for yourself. Jesus, even though he was legitimately in the form of God, does not consider it something to be held onto or taken for himself for his own benefit. Rather, What Jesus reveals is that to truly be the form of God, to truly be and to live as the members of the Trinity relate to each other, for us as human beings to truly be like that, we are to humble ourselves and take upon ourselves the form of a servant. This is called the kenosis in emptying. Kenosis is the Greek word, but it means to empty yourself of the rights and legitimate privileges that you have as an individual. Things that are really yours and that you're entitled to a degree, and to give them up when appropriate so that you can care and consider the needs of others before your own needs. God is self sufficient. God does not need anything from us. And yet, Jesus comes down, lives as one of us, and dies by our own hands to show us how we ought to live our lives. This does not benefit God. God does not need anything from us. God does not engage in quid pro quo relationships or this for that relationships. We don't scratch God's back so God will scratch ours, because God doesn't have a back. And if God did have a back, it doesn't get itchy. We can't do anything for God that God couldn't do for God's self. This is the Christian perspective. And so, why does God go to these great lengths of self-sacrifice for us when God doesn't need anything from us? Well, it's because God is not using humanity as a means to an end. We are the end. God is treating us as an end in and of ourselves and giving us respect and trying to help us out of a genuine love and concern for God's creation. This is at the core of the loving God, which is also why a statement about who God is that comes from the Christian scriptures is that God is love. Not that every time we love, in the sense that we use that word, we are somehow experiencing God or being God. Love is often twisted and terrible, how some people understand it. The love that's being talked about there is the refusal to use another person to satisfy your own ends, to use them to objectify them as a means to your own gratification, but rather to give yourself over for their needs because you love and appreciate them. This is the form of a willing servant, not a servant who is forced to submit and to be obedient, but someone who lovingly and freely chooses to submit. This is what the member of the Trinity, the Son, is always doing, because the Son looks to the Father and sees the Father, his actions, his words, his will, and the Son implements that in the Son's own life, in service, in obedience as a son to a father. This is within the very core of God. You have to remember as well that the Father and the Son are not separate. They are God in three persons. And we see this relational aspect when we look at the members of the Trinity together as they relate to each other. And it's why I said before, the first thing that was not good about creation was that the male was alone. And when a suitable partner, a helpmate, was made, it was then that they could relate as equals, much like the Father and the Son are equals. And there is this relationship between them of love and respect and willing service that goes both ways. That's what humanity's purpose is. It's founded in imaging the triune God and re-imaging these relationships as we relate to each other, just as the Son related to the Father. It's important to note that no single human being is ever in the role of the Father, and all others must serve them. We, as individuals, always find ourselves as imaging the role of the Son. We are followers of Christ, and so we are always taking on that form of a servant. And that's true whether you're young, whether you're old, whether you're male, whether you're female. All are called to be followers of Christ. And in Christ, for that mission of love and respect, there is neither male nor female, Jew nor Greek, slave nor free, as Paul says. There are not the normal class distinctions that we see in the world. All have the opportunity to, in obedience to the Father, The first, capital O, other, whose needs and desires we consider and serve, that is always anybody's choice and ability to do. And so they can serve the capital O, other, God, and the command of God that we are to obey is to love our neighbor, to love one another. And so we love each other as we obey and love God, who has commanded us to love one another. This is really the core of Christian ethics. There are questions about how do we consider the needs of others before ourselves? Sometimes that is not an easy, clear-cut answer. Sometimes it is pretty clear-cut. If you see someone starving who is going to die, then you should give them food. Um, this is also why communion is so important for Christians. The way that Christ presented it is he called the bread his body, which was broken. And he calls the cup of wine or grape juice. In many churches, they don't use wine. Um, he said that that is his blood. And what this pictures is that just as Christ was willing to allow himself to be killed by us, rather than coming down with some sort of like Greek god, Zeus power controlling people, Jesus allows himself to be given over fully to those who would harm him in non-violence, because he knows that he can show who God is through the cross, and that we can be his followers by doing the same thing, giving our lives, our bodies, our blood for others. And that's why the celebration of communion is so core to Christian patterns in worship, because it gets at the core of the ethics that are fundamental to the God who empties himself, to the God who gives away instead of demands and takes. God is inviting us into a lifestyle that is like this, of relationships of service and care and love and affirmation of each other, not of relationships of the dog eat dog, the objectification of individuals, the commodification of life, the use of others to gratify our own desires. That is not what God is calling us to. That is what, in the Christian terms, the world calls you to live by. But God calls you to live by a selfless logic. That's the core of Christian ethics, and that is what Christian ethics is trying to get at. It's trying to show how human beings can image the relationships within God's self, because humans are created in the image of God. That is our initial purpose. This has gotten really long. If anybody got to the end of this, thank you. I'll probably summarize at some point, and I have toyed around with the idea of making a standalone video, maybe with a whiteboard, and going over some of these things a little bit more in a coherent one video. I don't know if people are interested in that. If you are, let me know in the comments below. If I receive enough people who want it, I'll look into doing something with that. But I'm interested to hear if any of you out there are surprised by this as what Christian ethics is. I know for a fact that the church has often fallen very short of this high calling, and the individuals of the church as well as the church corporate. I mean, there has been tremendous failure within the history of the church on this, and that is because the church is made of flawed human beings. We, even though we decide and want to strive for this goal, often fall very short, and I have fallen short many times in my life and will probably again. I try not to be pessimistic on those things and relinquish myself to failure, but if history is any gauge, and my ignorance just of how I treat people and my lack of awareness of when I am harming others, I fully believe that I will step on some more toes as I go through life. But in any case, I would be interested to hear what people have to say about this. It is a different view of God, a God that kind of has anti-power. I would call the type of power and love that is exhibited here, this humility, this service, true power. But it really is anti-power in almost any definition of a powerful person or a powerful God. So in any case, I hope wherever you're at, you are doing well, and I hope this has been helpful or informative for any of you out there. Blessings.